Hello everyone, so we are back on our YouTube channel for Plasticos, Nurturing Creativity, and who else to, introduce to you guys Dr. Graeme Southwick, or Professor Graeme Southwick, as he's a professor at Monash University, and he is and teaching also, and he has people visiting from India and globally from last 30 years. So he has been a guiding force in our field of plastic surgery, and he can be called a universal guru, as we say. So Professor Southwick, we welcome you once again to our channel.
Thank you.
So there's been so first question that I would like to ask you: what drew you to plastic surgery and inspired you to choose it as a career?
I think I had enough trouble trying to decide whether to do medicine or not. And when you do decide what you want to do, and mine was influenced very much by my aunt who had done medicine, it really drove me into working hard and passionate about very simple things and naive things as a way. When you're young, you seem to think of importance in your life, which when you look back on when you're older is different. But it was really about finding cures for cancer and trying to help people who were suffering. So that was my main driving force. I found that medicine to me is a wonderful privilege to do what we do, to help people. There's not many disciplines in life where you can actually sit back very satisfied that you've accomplished something in some of the good things that we do as doctors around the world. I think that plastic surgery to me offers lots of skill sets relating to your education, your intelligence, your ability to think, your ability to create, your ability to perform duties with dexterity, and to marvel at the results that you achieve, and particularly the patients who, when you really help them, they become friends for your life. And there's not very much that I can say more that say that it's such a pleasure to be able to do that in our career. So plastic surgery offers a lot of things to me as a personal.
Oh, indeed, plastic surgery is a great branch. So my next question to you is that how does Melbourne Institute of Plastic Surgery came into being, and how do you ensure that you have like 7 plastic surgeons, if I'm not wrong?
We have 7 plastic surgeons, will be 9 plastic surgeons next year.
Wow. So how do you maintain such harmony? I mean, workplace harmony. How do you maintain that? And how did that Melbourne Institute of Plastic Surgery came into being?
Well, I trained in Australia, and then I did my ear, nose and throat surgery fellowship before my plastic and reconstructive surgery fellowship. A year in London, 18 months in the United States, came back to Australia in 1979. In 1979, I was very much into research in microsurgery, and I was establishing my laboratories at Monash University as a young senior lecturer, and at the time also working in the public sector in 2 major hospitals, the Alfred Hospital and Peter MacCallum Cancer Institute, which is a major cancer institute in Australia. I set my private practice up at a major hospital called Cabrini Hospital. But at that time you had to be invited into Cabrini. It was quite a family-orientated hospital where they chose who they wanted to work there. So I was very privileged to be able to be invited into that by Professor Sir Edward Hughes, who was Professor of Surgery at Monash University, President of the Royal Australasian College of Surgeons, very high-powered position. And he wanted me to be there, and it was a great pleasure to work with him and others. So when I established that, I set my own practice up, very quickly grew. I worked very much on the principle that create golden moments for your patients, and if you follow golden rules you will get those moments, and that grows your practice automatically. And I always say, do good work. If you keep doing good work, patients will speak about you and come back to you. My advertising budget in my first 15-20 years of practice was almost zero. I really never advertised. If I had advertising, it was because someone decided to write about me in the press without me instigating it. So there was never ever any paid advertising by me. I found that as time went by, my practice grew so fast, and it was very hard to keep up with all the work. So I was covering, I always say to my fellows when I'm training them that I do hand surgery, I do anything I can get my hands on. and that's what I was doing. So people would come to me with hand problems, with accidents, with cancers, a lot of ENT type problems, parotid gland issues, submandibular gland issues. I was doing head and neck cancer work. I was doing breast cancer reconstructions. I was doing some cosmetic surgery, and so on. So I found it was a very, very busy practice. And I also had a number of doctors from around the world at that stage, even about 30. I've been in practice almost, this is my 40th year.
Oh, wow.
So if you go back 30 years ago, there were people who started to want to come and work with me. And they were learning microsurgical skills, they were learning some free flap work that I was doing in those days, very early days of free flap surgery. I did the first free flap in private. In those days it was all being done in the public institutes.
And that was in which year?
That was in about 1979-80.
Wow.
About almost 40 years ago.
40 years.
So in those days it was really just getting busier to the point where I couldn't really cope with the load that I had. And I was working 6 to 7 days a week, 12 to 14 hours a day. I had family, I wanted to see my family more, and I decided that for a quality of lifestyle, which is so important, that it was I don't know if any of you read the cartoon Peanuts, but Peanuts has a little Charlie Brown, a little character, and that character sits on a fence looking out to the sea in one of his cartoons, and he's saying to the dog, and this little pet dog that he has, you know, you only live once, and the little dog says, no, that's not true. You actually only die once, you live every day. And the important message there is you've got to live every day. And that means you've got to have some family life and other recreational activities. I found in those days I was working too hard. So I brought on my first associate about 25, 27 years ago, something like that.
Okay.
We found that he became very busy too, so we needed more people. So that's why the Melbourne Institute was formed. So I formed the Melbourne Institute of Plastic Surgery, actually trading into another name called the Australian Institute of Plastic Surgery, which is for our worldwide patients. We have about 10 to 15% of my work comes from all around the world. And they are people who seek me out and they come and see us. So that's how the Institute began. But we didn't move into the current building that I'm in now because of we just grew out of the rooms that I had at the Cabrini Hospital, and we grew into this centre about 20. We moved in here in 2000, so it's 19 years we've been here.
Wow. So, Professor Southwick, I would like to ask, what one piece of advice would you give to people who have just entered this field? And I mean, mainly it's very difficult to strike a good balance between professional and personal life. So how would you suggest them that how to approach things and how to move forward in life?
I think the most important thing is before all of this you have to make the assumption that you're well trained.
Okay.
Well trained meaning that you can manage all the areas of plastic surgery that are as interest to that young person who's starting out. If you don't have that facility, you must get that facility. So my first message to all the people listening to Plasticos would be make sure that you're well trained in the best of your ability. So if there's an area of deficiency within your training, you must make sure you go and do a fellowship, visit somebody, make sure you spend the time to get that discipline behind you so that you feel very comfortable and confident at what you do. I mean, I overdid that because I was interested in head and neck, so I did my ear, nose and throat surgery as well as plastics, but then I made sure I covered hand surgery well, microsurgery well, cosmetic surgery well, all the things that I was interested in. I wanted to make sure that I knew what I was doing. You read prolifically, of course, but that means looking at the good journals. I happen to be on the board of a number of journals, and the important point there is to read the aesthetic surgery journals or the hand surgery journals. Feel your discipline that you want to have knowledge in. Then walks in the door, and if you're lucky enough and fortunate enough to have that patient, it's very easy to say, yes, I want to do that. But follow the family principle. The family principle is never do anything to any patient that you wouldn't do to your own family. So, for example, if a patient comes in and you haven't seen a rhinoplasty for maybe a year, and the patient sits there and you think they want a rhinoplasty, they want their nose fixed, and it's something that you want to do, but when you talk to that patient, they're the wrong sort of patient, or they might have a minimal deformity, or they may not have any deformity. It may be a psychological event that you're looking at. So in those situations, never be afraid to say no. So I think you earn your reputation in your lifetime in practice by the patient you should say no to, not the ones that you do. And if you are going to do it, make sure that you explain to the patients that you keep their expectations low. I always say that the expectation of a patient is inversely proportional to the explanation you give them. So if the more you explain, the less you offer, the more you deliver, the more the patient's not expecting it, the better and the happier the patient's going to be. So always do good work. So if you ask me to put in one line, what's important when you start practice as a young person, do good work and keep doing good work and make sure your patient's well looked after. That will generate more patients. And the best patient to create your practice is going to be the patients you've already operated on. If they speak well of you, your practice is going to grow. And there are a lot of people who don't follow those principles, and they're the ones that will suffer in their practice through their lifetime.
So I think the core thing is that the family test that you say. That
Absolutely. Don't do anything to anyone you wouldn't do. Don't do anything to anybody that you wouldn't do to your own family. If that's the case, you're going to be honest with yourself and your patient.
That's very true, sir. And as you are a very successful person, as we all know, so this is something related to the past event. If you could go back in time and change something in your life, what would it be?
That's a really difficult question, because I must say, I look back on my life and think of all the wonderful things that I've been involved with, the people I have met, the famous people, the not so famous people, the little old pensioners. I guess it's very hard to say there's one thing that I would change. That, again, I think I've been fortunate that I've fallen on my feet into a discipline that I really love. And the only thing I'd like to do is turn back the clock a little bit and be younger again now. But I don't think I can do that. So,
but you are doing that to many people. So turning back the clock.
Yeah, so I'm not really sure that there's one thing that I could put my finger on and say, wow, I want to change that. I think my research, I started my research in 1979. And
at Monash University?
At Monash University. When I came back, they were looking, I was working on microsurgery and nerve transfers and free vascularized nerves and reconstruction, and all of us come from a reconstruction background. Your aesthetic surgery is going to grow as your reconstructive surgery grows, and that's because the patients know you're doing good work. And I have a photograph where the hands are like this, and one finger's got reconstruction on it, the other's got aesthetic, because whatever we do, they're intermarried, and you can't really change that. But that's not answering your question. I think when I came back and I was asked if I could help develop the test tube baby program for Australia. Now, you know, what's test tube babies got to do with plastic surgery?
Exactly my question.
We are technicians, and technicians means that we can do all kinds of wonderful things with the microscope. We can do microsurgery, and that's what they wanted me to do, become the microsurgeon to their facility. And I did that, and that resulted in the first test tube baby for Australia from the male infertility side, which we started with direct single tubular microtubular bypasses down to about 0.1, 0.2 millimetres. We did a rabbit model. It was highly successful in 79. 1980 we made the first baby in the world from that, and it grew from there. We made about 3,000 babies I finished doing them in about 1987. So that was an area that you wouldn't really understand why you would go into that. But I found that if you look at all the technical skills that we as plastic surgeons have, you can help so many disciplines in the medical and surgical arena. So I think we've been pretty fortunate. I don't have any one thing I could say, except I'd probably say I love the research. I'd probably integrate that a little bit earlier in my career had I known what research can do. Doing a PhD and so on is important.
So as we know that Dr. Southwick, Professor Southwick is a all-rounder, and he's a big surgeon, he's a great academician, he's a professor at Monash University, and he was the first one to, do IVF in Australia. So, sir, tell us about your hobbies. Besides surgery, what all interests you?
I like reading, I like travelling, I like my art. I mean, I'd love to spend more time doing sculpturing because I think that's an area that I would enjoy. Mm-hmm. I gave a lecture at Harvard University, Boston at the Congress Center as a guest speaker some years ago. And at that time I was invited by a friend of mine to go across to Harvard, and we spent 2 days with the arts department. One day was doing charcoal drawing and the other was doing clay modelling. And it was really interesting to see that the first and second year art students at Harvard University were interested in how I could, with one of my colleagues I was working with, get the proportions right for the clay modelling for a face, for example, or a nose relating to eyelids, and where do the eyes sit, where do the ears sit. And we could do it very quickly, but of course they're skills that you don't appreciate as a plastic surgeon. You're learning as you go through your career. All the aesthetics and the ability to have three-dimensional thinking about where flaps should sit. It's not just a matter of taking an old flap. We used to do cross-leg flaps, and we used to do trapezial flaps and delta pectoral flaps, and then the micro flaps. And what you're doing is you're taking a hunk of soft tissue and putting it on to a defect. But it's more about how do you refine the defect? How do you get the nose looking like a nose rather than a blob of soft tissue sitting on the face to look like a nose? How do you get that three-dimensional perspective? And I think that's something that I've enjoyed. That's something I'd like to do more of as a hobby if I had more time. And I think one of the biggest problems for us as plastic surgeons, as you become more successful, the amount of time that you have to do things you really love disappears. But I love running, I love gym, I love yoga, I like to do even meditation. All of those things to me are really important to my quality of lifestyle. I love my family. I think family is really important. If I had one big message to plastic surgeons in their youth, make sure you study your family and spend time with them, because they grow up really quickly. But before your eyes, you don't know that it's passing you by.
So, coming to the family, sir, tell us a little bit about your family. How many members? And
yeah, okay. Well, I'm very fortunate. My father's still alive. My father's 96.
Wow.
My mother, I diagnosed her breast cancer. She died from it in 1987 at the age of 62, miles too young. I was lucky that my parents were very close to each other. They were married 43 years at that time. And I have a sister who is married. She did pharmacy and teaching and is married to a lawyer, a well-known lawyer in this town in Melbourne. And I have a beautiful wife. I've been married for over 50 years, and she's from Perth. She was a teacher. When I was starting out, I was very fortunate that she was by my side, because if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't have been able to get my career off the ground, because I lent on her financially and she kept me in the manner in which I was accustomed. So I was pretty fortunate. We had 2 children, but the 2 children we had were during my training years, during my fellowship years, and that's a tough time for everyone, but it keeps the family together, and you need a supportive partner next to you to be able to be successful. My children are growing up now. My daughter is a lawyer. She said she'd never be a doctor or marry one, so she did law commerce. She married a doctor, of course, but he doesn't work as a doctor anymore. He did his medical degree, very highly awarded, and ended up going into a physician training program, dermatology. Then suddenly threw it all in one day and went into business with my daughter, and has been very highly successful in the healthcare industry, but not as a practicing doctor as such. My son, he's He did. I thought he might have been a doctor. He came into the operating room one day when I was putting his potential medical course. So he went into commerce management and.
So it is because of your operation theatre. He was not there in the medical field.
Correct. I talked him out of medicine by showing him what we do.
But you are a great surgeon.
But they're both married. He's married to a very lovely girl who he went to school with as well. They have 3 girls, and my son has my daughter has 3 boys. The oldest one doing medicine, so that's really nice.
So how many grandkids?
6 grandchildren, ranging from 21 down to 7.
Wow. So Professor Southwick, if you don't mind, can we ask your age?
Yeah, I'm about 21 plus about 51. 72.
That's the right way to put it.
And I don't feel like 72.
You are 72 years young, not old.
Correct, yeah. And I was hoping that if you do your fellowship with me for a bit longer, I can come and see you for a facelift.
Oh, I would love to. So, Professor Southwick, as you say, I mean, I know this now, that you always introduce your wife as your first wife.
Yes.
What's about that? Tell us about that.
Well, it's a funny story, but when I go to a lot of meetings, I find that I guess some people, maybe they marry the wrong person. I'm not sure if their decision. Maybe I was just very lucky. But I think it's very important to have stable relation. It's like stable work. Mm-hmm. If you've got a stable working environment, and that relates to the nurses you work with. I've worked with mine for many years.
Yeah.
One up to 40 years, one at 35 years, one at 33 years, one at 29 years.
Wow.
So all of these, I call them my wives, but they're not really my wife. But I see more of them really in the operating room and in my work every day than I do of my own wife. My wife's always taken an interest in what I do. I've always been interested in what she does. We have our compartmentalisation. I think if I was to retire one day, we might get a divorce because she'll really find out who I am. But the important thing is...
That's why you're working at this age also.
That's one of the reasons that keeps me working.
Yes. Now we know the reason.
But more important is that the fact that I think stability around you is important. And the reason I call her my first wife is that I often go to meetings and someone's on their second or third wife, and I just think it's quite funny. So I usually say that this is my first wife. And I'm still very fond of her, I must say.
So she'll remain your first wife and your first boss also.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I'm actually the head of the unit, but at home in our household, and she's the neck. She turns the head any way she wants.
Oh, that's a great way to put it, and I think I'll use those words with my wife too. Okay. So hopefully that will help me too.
I've met your wife. She's very good. I think you're under the thumb.
See? So that's the first impression. I think my wife will be happy with this. I'll make sure that she sees the interview. So now there will be some rapid fire questions, sir. So you have to tell me about your favorites. So I'll ask you 5 questions. So you have to answer. So your favorite food?
My favorite food?
Yep.
I like Japanese food. I think would probably be one of my favorites, but I like a really good Australian steak.
Okay. Your favorite tourist spot?
Wow, that's a really hard one. I love the Antarctic. I thought that was beautiful, but Bhutan's really beautiful too. There's some wonderful places in the world.
And
India's fantastic. Yeah, I really enjoy the culture there.
Indians love you.
Fantastic. Yep. I've had a lot of good memories from India.
Yeah. So, your favorite sport?
My favourite sport, Australian rules football.
So those of you who don't know, I think it's called footy, right?
It's called footy. It's 18 people a side. It's a very tough game. You can be attacked from 360 degrees only when you have the ball. You're not allowed to throw the ball. It's an oval ball, a bit like a rugby ball, but you can kick it, you can bounce it, you can punch it, but you're not allowed to throw it. You can catch it, which is called a mark, and the idea is to kick goals. And it's a very fast-moving, very tough game with a lot of injuries, which is very good for plastic surgeons because you get a lot of hand injuries, a lot of facial injuries, and I worked with some of the clubs for 31 years.
So those of you who are thinking of going into footy, I would recommend you to first watch YouTube videos of footy and then make a decision, because it's not that an easy sport that it sounds. So Coming back to the other question, what is your favorite car?
My favourite car.
Yeah.
I like a car that's comfortable today, not so sporty. I suppose one of the nicest makes, but this is an advertising campaign. Look, I had a Bentley for a long time, and it's a beautiful car. It's a man-made car rather than machine put together. Everything was beautiful in it, and I really enjoy that. But it's a comfort machine. It's not really a sports machine, even though it was an all four-wheel drive and very fast. So I enjoyed driving that car. My wife thinks it's too ostentatious, didn't like to go in it at all, never drove it, had it for 11 years, never drove it at all. The cars I've tended to use mostly have been Mercedes, and I've had Mercedes Sports and Mercedes Coupes and Mercedes soft tops and Mercedes sedans, and they're a great car too.
So
I don't like the fact that they're developing all these electronics that you don't drive the car anymore, it does it itself. I think that's a pity. That's like a plastic surgeon being a robot. And I'm not sure robots are really what we want to be.
So basically, I think we can approach Bentley, as we have got a very good endorsement by Professor Southwick for Bentley, and I think we can get a sponsorship from Bentley.
Absolutely, why not?
So, Professor Southwick, thank you very much for this lovely interview. It has been a pleasure chatting with you, getting to know about you, and I hope our young plastic surgeons and also the experienced ones also will gain a lot out of this interview. And we hope that you will be coming to India soon, and we'll have a chance again to host you there.
Thank you. I think the hospitality of the Indian Plastic Societies has been amazing. I've been there a few times now. Yeah, from a plastic surgical point of view, it's one of the best countries in the world to visit, and I'm proud to say I've been there several times for it. I think I wish the journal every success in the future. It's only as successful as the people who drive it and those that contribute to it. So all those readers out there, please contribute and make the journal a success, because that's going to raise the bar and the standards of plastic surgery in all countries around the world, which is wonderful, because look at the world today. It's in so much turmoil, but plastic surgeons, we can contribute to show people that we can do things in a peaceful and very successful manner and raise our standards and help people who are suffering from various conditions that we can help through the world. So thanks for the opportunity to be able to talk to you today.
Thank you, Professor Southwick. It was a pleasure.